Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome back again to the Compass Points podcast, where every week we talk about Knoxville and Knox County government, politics, business, education, news, anything that gets our attention. I am Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com, which covers all of the above. Joined, as always, by Scott Barker, also co-founder and co-publisher of Compass. How are you doing today, Scott?
Doing fine, Jesse, although I just spent about 6 hours in a budget meeting, so that was, I've got numbers swirling around in my head.
This is the City of Knoxville annual budget retreat where they kick off their budget process for the year. Always gripping.
It was gripping. It was almost as good as Hamilton.
I'm sure. That's right. It's kind of I wonder why nobody has yet adapted City of Knoxville politics to. I mean, if you can turn Hamilton into a musical, probably we could have. There's a lot of drama in city government, right?
Well, in this meeting and other recent ones, they certainly have been trying to, because they keep dropping lines from Hamilton into their conversations, and then when nobody gets it, they have to explain that
it's a line from Hamilton.
But anyway, if you can make a musical out of that, you can make a musical out of anything.
Sure. Well, we're not going to be talking much about that today. We'll give you a little time to process this. I know you're going to be writing about it for next week. And
we will have that next week. A little bit of discussion from the budget retreat. Basically, all they do in these retreats anyway is they kind of give you a snapshot of where the city is now. City's fine; they're not going bankrupt or anything. Don't worry about it. And then they talk about some of the things. Looking forward, to next year's budget, no concrete numbers, proposals, anything like that. So it's not, it's not a, there's not a stop the presses moment or anything from it. But it's good to keep tabs of. It's the official kickoff of budget season for the city. So we'll have a report on it.
Some people look forward to March Madness. We look forward to budget season. Well, look forward might be an exaggeration.
Well, we take it as it comes.
We take it as it comes. All right. Well, we do have other things to talk about this week. Coming up, we have an interview with Belinda Woodiel-Brill from Knoxville Area Transit, who will be talking about their new plans. The school board had some interesting discussion this week about a bill collection contract. The state legislature took some action on the proposed bill that would criminalize drag performances, especially if minors are present. And Knox Pride had a pretty strong statement about that. Some news about new development in the old city and a little bit of controversy having to do with a historic building there. And we are going to start out with Knox County government is getting ready to establish something called a mental health court. Scott, do you know what a mental health court is?
There are lots of tasteless jokes I could make, but yes, I'm somewhat familiar with it. It is a way of of having someone's case go through the judicial system outside of regular court if they have mental health issues. But you're the one who covered it, so
that's
you,
right.
You give the real response. I just gave the top of my head, kind of make it up as I go.
Yeah, no, that's right. And these are courts that have kind of grown across the country, and there's a handful of them already existing in Tennessee. All of the other 3 big metro counties that we always talk about as sort of like peer counties with Knox County, Hamilton County, Davidson, and Shelby, all have some version of a mental health court. And so Knox County is getting ready to establish one. County Commission is going to be voting on it this month. Basically, they're just receiving a state grant. There's state funding available for this now. As of last year, Governor Lee signed a bill that kind of promised state funding to any localities that want to establish these. And so Knox County is going to be receiving some startup funding to kind of get it going administratively, and then in next year's budget, they'll be pursuing broader state funding for kind of ongoing operating expenses. But of course, there's been a lot of talk about mental health in recent years because mental health needs kind of impact the entire civic realm, right, that we talk about. They impact the school system, lots of discussion in the schools. We've talked about the schools and others trying to put more resources toward kids who need help with mental health issues. It impacts the justice system. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion that there are people in jail or kind of going in and out of jail who actually have mental health needs that would be better served by some other setting that is not jail. And so what this court would do is, everybody has to agree to it, basically. So if you have somebody who's charged with an offense, that's the first thing. To even get into this, obviously, it's part of the criminal justice
court
system, right? So you have to actually be charged with some kind of criminal offense. But then if your attorney and the District Attorney General's office and the judge who's going to be overseeing this court, which is going to be Judge Chuck Cerny, General Sessions Court judge, if they all agree that, yes, this case meets the criteria, this is somebody who clearly has, each person will have to be evaluated and kind of certified that, yes, they have mental health needs and that they would be better served by a treatment program that keeps them out of jail than by potentially going through the normal criminal justice process and ending up in jail. Those would be the people they're focusing on. And if somebody is eligible for it and approved for it, then they would be assigned to a case manager. They would have regular mental health treatment, and that would probably vary depending on who they are, what their needs are, but probably ongoing therapy for like up to a year, medication, of course, and they would have regular check-ins, quarterly meetings with all of those kind of stakeholders, evaluating the case, saying, is this working? With the goal that the people who are being treated would stay out of jail, would stay out of the criminal justice system. And I talked to Mike Hammond, who's the criminal court clerk in Knox County, and he kind of headed up an exploratory committee that Mayor Glenn Jacobs appointed last year to look at this and see what the benefits could be. And he said that from other localities they've talked to, including other places in Tennessee, he went up to Brooklyn, which had one of the first mental health courts in the country. They talked to people from Miami-Dade County, which has a large program there. And they heard very positive things about it, including that they had a success rate. And the way they kind of gauge success rate is basically, do you avoid, well, first of all, are you meeting your various metrics? Are you staying on your medication? And are you making, some cases they might need to try to help people find housing. Are you keeping your housing? Are you finding a job if you're eligible to work? Of course, some people may be on disability. But the biggest one is, are you staying out of the criminal justice system?
Staying out of jail.
Yeah. Are you not having any further encounters with police that are bringing you back into the system? And they're saying over the course of that 1 year, they're saying that these programs are showing 70 to 80% success rates at keeping people out of the system, keeping them out of jail, which of course, the more people you keep out of jail, that reduces the strain on our jail system and of course the cost of it is much, even providing these services with case management and treatment is less than keeping somebody in jail for 8 months or however long they might be there.
Because they still have to be treated in jail.
Right, yes, and jails do also have to provide the medication and have, some requirements for treatment and so forth. So County Commission is going to vote on this month, but again, they're just voting to receive state money, so I don't think there's going to be any controversy about that. And it should start up probably later this year. They'll have to go out and hire some case managers and kind of get all of it set up. But, it's an interesting step. It's something they have been talking about for a little while. We do have 2 other recovery courts. We have a drug court that functions somewhat the same, where people who need drug treatment are given that and, can be diverted from jail. And then we also have a separate veterans court, which specifically deals with military veterans who may be having some of these same problems. And of course, there may be some overlap between all of these things, people who are veterans, who have drug issues, who have mental health issues. And so the 3 courts are going to have to kind of decide where their parameters are in terms of, if you mostly need drug treatment with some mental health treatment, you'll go through the drug court.
Yeah.
If you mostly need mental health treatment with maybe some drug treatment, you'll go through the mental health court. If you're a veteran with either of those things, you'll probably go through the veterans court because that's specifically dedicated to that population. But it's just, it's one more way that I think we're seeing people at the state and local levels try to think in less binary terms about criminal justice issues, and that it's not just about whether or not somebody did something wrong and therefore needs to be punished. It's about, how do we deal with some of these deeper underlying issues.
Right.
Okay, so let's turn now to some development news in the Old City, actually dealing with a well-known local restaurateur and former political candidate. What's going on there?
Well, the aforementioned former political candidate and restaurateur is Jim Clanaris. He and his wife Lori own Kefi and some other restaurants in town. The his restaurants are highly regarded, and he ran for city council 2 years ago, and didn't win, obviously. But he also was looking for more business ventures, and he is going to. He bought a building in the Old City on Jackson Avenue, East Jackson Avenue, just down from the intersection of Jackson and Central, between that intersection and the side of the new baseball stadium, which plays a big role in this. But anyway, he bought this building. It's a 1-story building. It's an old warehouse. It was an old armor packing company.
Right. It's basically that low brick warehouse that's right across the street from Kefi.
It is right across. Yes, it is right across the street from Kefi. But it's 1-story, a very nondescript brick facade, and what he wants to do is tear it down and build a 6-story boutique hotel with 26 units, and those units would be more condo type units. They'll be marketing them as short-term rentals,
like Airbnb properties.
Like Airbnb, yeah. It's going to have a restaurant on the ground floor. It's going to be a steakhouse called Jim's on Jackson. Basement, he wants to have a kind of a swanky bourbon bar. And there will be a couple of penthouse condos on the top floor that they would be for sale. But he wants to invest $20 million in this. And he's very, when I talked to him, he was very excited about it because, it's right down the street from the baseball stadium site. It'll be finished, assuming everything goes according to his timeline. It'll be finished about the time the stadium opens in 2025. And so, he has applied for a demolition permit in order to demolish the structure. However, the National Register of Historic Places has a historic district, the Southern Railway Terminal and Warehouse Historic District. This building is in it.
Right, covers most of the old city.
Most of the old city. This building is in it, is considered a contributing structure to it.
Because it's actually an old building.
It is an old building. It was built in the 1890s, and originally it was actually two buildings in the 1890s. At some point along the way, got combined into one. They did replace the facade. Doesn't date back that we were talking about. It dates back to the 1930s, which is still
historic.
Still historic. It's just not quite the 19th century cachet. But anyway, he applied for a demolition permit, and Knox Heritage, the local historic preservation organization, has objected to that. They believe that he should at least be able to save the facade and incorporate that into his design. They actually it was funny. Clemaris had not announced he's going to be doing this, and the first real public knowledge that he was going to was when Knox Heritage sent out a statement saying that they, that he had applied for this permit and they objected to it and all. And then I looked up who owned the property and everything, saw that it was Clemaris and followed up from there. But the one thing is the historic designation doesn't prevent Clemaris from tearing down the facade. The main thing that it does, from a practical standpoint, is in the immediate practical standpoint is he has to wait 60 days. He can apply. He applied for the permit last month. Has to wait 60 days, and then they'll probably grant it, and he'll.
Right. There's a city ordinance that if your building qualifies for historic protection or designation, there's a 60-day sort of waiting period after a demolition permit is applied for, just in case something can be worked out to save it or so forth.
And we'll say this, that Clemaris did reach out to Knox Heritage before all this happened, and they had talked, and Knox Heritage folks toured the site. There's some huge problems with the building, and he actually has a website about the project that is more about, hey, this is how bad this place is now than it is about what it's going to be in the future. At least that's the way it is so far. But it's got some real problems, especially on the inside. It had been the floor, because it's one story. Remember, it's one story, so there's one floor essentially in a basement. But it's got multiple levels. You're like stepping up, stepping down, going through all that, and that would have to all be torn out. A lot of the building had been, they put refrigeration units in, a lot of mold and rotted wood because of that and everything. So it is in bad shape. Of course, he probably, from my understanding, he probably could save the facade if he had unlimited funds. Because remember, they would have to stabilize it while they did all the stuff to those weird floors.
Right.
So that'd be, but, and he said that he was open to preserving the facade, but his engineers and architects told him, nah.
It's just going to cost too much.
The engineers are probably like, sure, we'll do it.
Well, and one thing we should say about the cost of this project, because of where it is and it's in that orbit of the stadium, he will not be able and doesn't plan to apply for tax increment financing there, which a lot of downtown developments have applied for, particularly people who are trying to preserve historic buildings. But because of the TIF district surrounding the stadium that's going to go to help to pay for the stadium, that's not and we talked about this when that TIF district first got established. Anything around it, those redevelopment tools aren't available.
Yeah, and this was one thing that I thought about when that happened, because so many of the historic buildings that have been renovated and reused in Knoxville in the last 25 years have used either tax increment financing or payment in lieu of tax agreements, to be able to. And those are things because banks are hesitant to loan the full amount to them because it's risky. And so the city and county come in with these tax incentives to kind of fill that gap in. They can get funding and go on and build it. In this case, because it's in that TIF district, in a way a TIF works, listeners probably are sick of us talking about this, but the way they work is you go in and you buy a piece of property, you improve it, your property taxes go up. That amount that they go up, that increment, goes to another, is dedicated to something. In the district,
instead of just going to the government.
Instead of just going to the government and they do what they will with it. In this case, in this district, all these properties that get redeveloped, that increment goes toward first paying for the infrastructure around the stadium, and second paying for the debt on the stadium.
Yeah,
and then so there is no there's no option really for the developer to get an incentive. And I was wondering when the TIF district was announced, well, will anybody actually be able to build in here because traditionally they've used
we've gotten so used to downtown developers requesting those.
But Clonaris is saying that the banks are fine with his financing. He doesn't have partners in the business itself. He does have some other investors in the property, but the banks have no issue at all with getting money, so he doesn't need the financing, the public financing. So he's not going to be asking for tax break. The tax increment that comes from the development would go toward the infrastructure and stadium debt, but the price is losing a building that it does contribute, however modestly,
right,
to this historic district.
It is a modest building, it's true. All right, well, I guess for those of you who frequent the Old City, you're probably going to start seeing some more construction down. There's already construction going on that block because there's the two buildings just down from it, the old NV nightclub
right, the
area,
Bowery building. Yeah.
Right, which is also being redeveloped.
And just another few scores of feet down on the other side of Barley's, there's going to be another hotel going in there.
Right.
And and there are other properties are being snatched up and bought and sold and by developers. You assume they're going to be putting in developments. And a lot of this is because of the stadium.
Sure. Yeah. Well, between the stadium and all of that, the Old City, I think we can expect to just be a bit of a construction zone for the next little while.
Yeah. You don't want to. There won't be much turning right on Jackson if you're going north on Central.
Right. All right. Moving from the local to the state level, the state Senate this week voted on a bill that we have talked about before, which basically makes it illegal to present a drag performance, which is defined in the bill as a performance involving male and female impersonators in a place, first of all, not on public property at all, and also not in a place where it may be viewed by a minor, somebody under 18. And this is a reaction to the growth in recent years of popularity of drag shows, the mainstreaming of drag shows. We've talked here before, a lot of this has been driven by a very popular TV show, RuPaul's Drag Race, which has been around for almost, I think it's in its 15th season, and I read that its current season is its most popular ever. So the ongoing popularity and mainstreaming of drag performances has produced something of a culture war backlash, and the specific concern is that there's something wrong about kids seeing drag performances. And, the allegations that have been made about this is that these performances are sexual and therefore kids are being exposed to inappropriately sexual material, which a lot of the people who are pushing and supporting this bill, when they talk about supporting it, they preface it by saying, well, I've never seen a drag show. Like I've heard multiple members of our own local delegation say, I've never seen a drag show. I have no interest in it, but here's why we need to do this. And again, and I've been harping on this, but I really think like we're watching a state law being passed here that I think is proceeding on sort of fundamentally false premises. And part of what we do here is fact checking. Drag shows are not inherently sexual.
No,
somebody dressing up, a man putting on a dress, putting on lipstick, putting on makeup, putting on a wig, and going out and lip syncing to a Lady Gaga song or whatever, is not inherently sexual. And the if you read the bill, it refers to sections of state law that have to do with obscenity and already make it illegal for minors to attend, to go to strip clubs and so forth, which strip clubs, again, are inherently sexual. The entire point, and I'm not taking anything away from the skill involved in putting on a good strip performance. People can be very good dancers. They can be good acrobats. But the goal of the strip performance is sexual excitation. That's exactly what it's there to do. Everybody knows it. It's why bachelor parties go to them. That is, I don't think that anybody would really argue that, no, this isn't about sexual excitation. It very much is. Drag shows are not. Drag shows are just kind of fundamentally not about sexual excitation.
The whole point of a drag show is to keep the clothes on.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and they're about entertainment, they're about costuming, they can be about dancing. Some drag performers sing, some lip sync, but they're not inherently sexual. And so this law has some sort of peculiarities to it because it is still referring to these sections of state law that do spell out that these performances have to be sort of quote unquote, for a prurient interest, a sexual interest. And since these, and especially all ages drag performances, like when people have drag brunches and so forth, are sort of, because drag performances can be raunchy. They can tell dirty jokes and that kind of thing. But the all ages ones, tend to not be that. It's people dressing up and performing, dancing, singing, and so forth. And so to me, as somebody who very much values the First Amendment, it feels like there's a First Amendment issue here. And what this bill really kind of seems to be doing is saying that you cannot undertake certain activities like singing and dancing that would otherwise be fine if you're wearing specific kinds of clothes and you are of a specific gender. So if you're a woman who wants to put on a dress and makeup and a wig, if you're Dolly Parton, let's say, and you want to go out even dressed, sort of provocatively, again, Dolly Parton, that's fine. That's legal. You're just putting on a show. If you're a man who does the literal exact same thing, this is now potentially going to be illegal in the state. And I don't know where this is going to land sort of legally. You can imagine all sorts of lawsuits that could be brought, but of course, who would have standing to bring them? You would have to have maybe a venue that, or a performer or somebody, who felt like they were being somehow impacted by it. Anyway, in the short, so the state Senate passed this week. Now it'll go to the state House. The Senate passed it on a straight party line vote. Republicans voted for it. The 6 Democrats who are in the Senate voted against it. And the leaders of Knox Pride, which is our local LGBTQ advocacy group, came out with a very strong statement saying that basically this is an attack on the LGBTQ community at large. Drag, as it has kind of grown up in this country, is inherently embedded in LGBTQ culture. It came out of gay clubs. And has kind of, like I said, crossed over into the mainstream, but it's still very much tied into LGBTQ culture. And so their argument is that this is, that this idea of protecting children and so forth is really kind of an excuse to continue to target every year the Tennessee State every year for however many years now, the Tennessee State Legislature introduces some raft of bills targeting the LGBTQ community, and that this is another one of these bills. And that's really the goal of it. It's basically an anti-LGBTQ bill. And Knox Pride said that if this bill passes, they're going to cancel their Pride celebrations. They have a parade that has become very popular. It's one of the best attended parades downtown every year. And then they have Pride Fest, which has been held in recent years at World's Fair Park, which is public property owned by the city. This bill says basically you can't do drag performances on public property. And so that, again, it says drag performances that appeal to a prurient interest, but that is a bit of a vague thing. And so if you think about Knox Pride looking at this, if you say this bill passes, and let's say they wanted to do Pride Fest at World's Fair Park again, they would have to talk to the city. They and the city would have to decide, is the entertainment that we're planning okay or not? And they may not have a lot of clear guidance beyond whatever's in the bill on making that determination. And so what Knox Pride has said is just that we're just not going to do it. We're not going to hold a parade, and we're not going to. And the festivals become very popular. I mean, 10,000 plus people come down to it every year. City mayors, both Mayor Kincannon, former Mayor Rogero, have attended Pride Fest. Many city council members make a point of going down there and kind of showing their support. And so what Knox Pride has come out and said is that, it's great for people in the community to want to support us. It's great for people to come out to Pride. But if you want to support us, you've got to support us. And we're being targeted by the legislature here. And so
basically, if you want to support us, stop this bill.
Right.
Don't
speak up.
Yeah. Don't just say that we support you and fly the rainbow flag. Stop the bill.
Right.
That's what is threatening to them. That's what's threatening their community.
And we also had this past week an illustration of the kind of legal environment that this bill hasn't even passed yet. But the legal environment that all this rhetoric has created, the sheriff of Putnam County, which is where Cookeville is, came out this week, the day that the Senate passed the bill. I don't know for sure that there was a connection between his announcement and that, but he was announcing something that had happened 3 weeks earlier. So for whatever reason, the day that the Senate passed the bill, Putnam County Sheriff Eddie Ferris came out and said that 3 weeks earlier there had been a drag brunch held in Putnam County, a private event organized by Upper Cumberland Pride, which is the local pride organization there, similar to Knox Pride here. They held a private drag brunch that people had to pay to go to. It wasn't even in public. It wasn't on public property, but it brought out some protesters, as drag performances have started to do just in the past year. And I just want to emphasize again how recent this is. We've had drag shows in Knoxville forever, drag shows in Tennessee forever, and over the past 10 years, we've had this movement of drag shows into more and more venues, not just gay clubs. This has been going on for years. It's literally only in the past year. And I've talked about before the way that this was kind of driven by right-wing media. It's partly related to some of the kind of moral panic around transgender issues. Drag queens who are not necessarily transgender got pulled into that. And so now, and I just have to say, as a reporter, to me, it's peculiar to see suddenly people who never said anything about any of this stuff suddenly decide that this is an emergency. This is one of the first bills that the Senate introduced and passed this year. Like our state government is treating drag shows like an emergency. What do you make of that?
Well, it is strange. One of the things that some of these events show, like the one in Putnam County and others, just demonstrate. If you're not aware, if you don't have your finger on the pulse of the LGBTQ community, of how normal drag shows have become.
Yeah.
I mean, they're used as fundraisers.
Yeah.
They're here, they're there, they're everywhere.
We just said there was just a fundraiser here at the Mill and Mine organized by City Councilwoman Amelia Parker.
Right.
With the title "Drag is Art." She was obviously making her own statement.
Oh yeah,
with that.
Absolutely. She made no bones about that. Yes, she was. But the thing is that drag shows have become, how ubiquitous might be too big of a term, but common, and they're
One of the most popular shows on cable television
Yes.
is all about a drag
Yeah,
competition.
so it's the idea that it's some kind of an emergency, is very strange.
Well, and just to finish because I started talking about the Putnam County thing and then got distracted by wondering about exactly how this became an emergency. But what the Putnam County Sheriff came out and said, he sent members of his investigations division to this performance to monitor it, to make sure that no laws were broken. And the one thing that they ended up doing is they cited a bartender for serving an underage patron there, something that probably wouldn't have even happened had they not made it a point to have law enforcement presence there in the first place. But he had so you think about, this is a private event in Putnam County being put on by the LGBTQ advocacy group in Putnam County, which probably feels like a fairly beleaguered organization. Putnam County is a mostly rural county. Even in Knox County, Knox Pride would tell you that, they still feel pretty beleaguered, sort of culturally and politically. But so you're this organization in Putnam County, and just because you're having your own private event, the sheriff's office shows up and has members of its investigations division in the room keeping an eye on you. And so this is kind of the legal atmosphere that's being created even before this law has passed.
When I saw that, one of the thoughts that entered my mind, because I'm a weird guy, is I wonder if the investigators enjoy the show.
Right.
If they were entertained.
Yeah, it would be a good question.
They went there and they're probably, like, oh gosh, I gotta go. Why am I having to come here? And they go there and whoever's up there singing the Lady Gaga song or lip syncing to her, or whatever, and they get entertained and they actually have a good time. Who knows?
Who knows? Well,
we haven't had a chance to ask them yet. So.
And we'll see if there is, if the Knox Pride statement brings out any kind of organized response from anybody here in Knoxville. I don't think we're going to see a lot of response probably from Knox County government, because County Mayor Glenn Jacobs is among those who has spoken out saying he doesn't think kids should be able to go to drag shows and so forth. So if there were going to be any sort of official response, but of course, at the same time, potentially working against any statement from the city of Knoxville, say, is our legislature's demonstrated propensity to also go after and punish city governments that do things they don't like, as we've seen them going after the city of Nashville for various reasons this year. And so that's something that also local representatives are probably going to have to weigh in deciding how to respond to all of this. We'll continue to cover it. Obviously, I just think it's an interesting thing to be sitting here in 2023 watching our state government literally talk about criminalizing drag queens. It's not exactly a place that I thought we would end up in. Okay, turning away from that to the school board. They held their monthly meetings this past week. They discussed several interesting issues, but one thing that generated a lot of discussion and feedback sort of in the general public, they had an agenda item to hire a collections agency, a debt collector, basically, to go after people who owe student meal debt. So this is, kid goes to school, buys lunch and or other snacks, the various things you can buy in a school cafeteria. And then and the way the system is set up, because I have kids in the schools, so people who haven't had kids in schools recently may not know how this works now. But basically, I think kids can still go and pay with cash, probably. I'm not actually even 100% sure of that, but let's assume that they can. I'll follow up on that and find out for next week. But most people, certainly what we do, is you can put money on your kid's account online, and then they go through and charge it. And if they go through the line and they don't have sufficient funds, they'll still sell them the food, but then you're basically running a tab at that point.
Right.
And if your kid goes into the negative amounts on their tab, you'll get an email, like I get sometimes, saying, your kid's $5 over on their account, you need to put some more money in. So then you put some more money in. And so these are debts that basically don't get cleared or that keep accumulating. And for the past 2 years during the pandemic, so the school system has had a debt collector in the past. This is a policy that the school board adopted some years ago for certain debts. The first level is the school system sends them notices, and then if they send X number of notices, then they can be referred to a debt collector. And so they've had this arrangement in the past. It got suspended during the height of the COVID pandemic because federal pandemic relief money basically covered everybody's meals. So for the past 2 school years, all school meals were free for all students across the whole country, including here in Knox County. And so nobody was running up student debt during that. And so now that subsidy has ended, and we're back to people running up student debt. And school officials said that right now the school system is looking at about $205,000 system-wide. And it's interesting, if you look at the school-by-school breakdown, your first thought might be, well, that's mostly going to be concentrated in like our poorer communities. But in the poorest communities in the county, if significant enough percentage of students meet the threshold for free and reduced lunches and breakfasts, the whole school gets free and reduced lunches and breakfast. And so we have a good number of schools across the county, most of the inner city schools, some of the more rural schools as well, where they just get free lunches and breakfasts anyway. So it's actually in some of the more suburban schools. And some of the debt might just be people not getting around to paying it. But of course, even in schools in more affluent areas, you have plenty of lower income families. And so it's probably most concentrated there. So they had a contract on the agenda this month to hire anew a debt collection agency. And the agency that they had selected is an agency that already does some debt collection work for Knox County government, based in Minnesota, called IC System. And basically what it would have empowered them to do is, not to put too fine a point on it, but kind of bug people, harass them. You can, the contract spelled out very specifically, like if they owe X amount of money, you can call them 3 times a week. If they owe this much, you can call them 7 times a week, or send X number of emails or whatever.
At what point can they break legs?
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say, is this is not it does not get into physical intimidation. Let's hope. It's really just kind of trying to become annoying enough that people say, okay, fine, I'll pay. And that agency would then get to keep about 21% of all that. That's how they would get paid, is they would get a 21.5% commission on all the money they collect. So it popping up on the agenda prompted some people to say, what is this? Not realizing that this is something the school system had done in the past, and ask a lot of questions about it, and kind of say, is this really something that like $200,000 on the one hand is a lot of money, on the other hand is a extremely small percentage of the total school budget, or even the school nutrition budget. And so is this really something we should be focusing on right now? And there was enough pushback and enough questions raised about it that School Board Chair Christy Christie actually came out at Thursday's meeting and said, let's just pull this contract and let's go back and look at this policy that we have that requires us to hire a debt collector, and talk about if this is really how we want to handle this. And so they decided not to do it. That doesn't mean that they will not continue to, that the school system itself will not continue to try to collect that. If you have a kid who has overdue amount on their account, you're still going to hear from the school system. And it's not saying that they won't come back and hire a debt collection agency at some point in the future, but they're not going to do it for this year. And they're going to just kind of talk about this policy and whether they really want to be in the position of, kind of trying to shake down people who might be in some financial difficulty.
Yeah, it's a strange scenario there, where they're actually hiring a collection agency to shake down kids.
Yeah,
it's,
right.
Although it's really shaking down their parents. But you
kind of think of the old like Calvin and Hobbes, where he had the school bully who was always coming and taking his lunch money.
Yeah, that's what the first thing I thought was stealing your lunch money. And but as you said, $200,000 isn't a huge amount in terms of the school budget, but I can't think of a soul who I know who would turn down $200,000 if you gave it to them.
Oh, sure.
I mean, so
including the school system,
including
Absolutely.
the school system, and so I mean, it is I think the biggest news there for me was the size of the debt. 200. I would not have thought it was $200,000.
Yeah, and the schools that had the most were mostly high schools, which makes sense because they're the biggest schools. They have the most students. And the most that any school had was, I think it was Carnes, maybe had about $14,000, which sounds like a lot, but if you assume that maybe that's spread across, I don't know, say it's spread across 200 kids, it's not actually that much money per kid. And I've had my own kids run up because, as parents, you don't know necessarily what your kids are doing. And I've had my own kids run up, $15 or $20 before I realized, oh, wait, I need to put some more money in here. Right. And so that's probably kind of a floating number that fluctuates as people do pay. But anyway, it was an interesting conversation, and we'll see what comes out of the board's further policy discussion there. Okay, now we are getting up to our interview segment for this week with Belinda Woodiel-Brill of Knoxville Area Transit. But Scott, why don't you go ahead and set up this interview for us by telling us what CAT is up to these days?
Well, CAT is reformulating its bus network. They're redesigning it. They're through this process they're calling CAT Reimagined. Lots of public input, lots of public meetings. And then just recently they have put out their draft version of what that network is. And they're getting public input on it. And at some point in the future, we'll make a transition to that. Routes will be eliminated. Routes will be changed. Frequency will change. Some routes, they and the basic thing was they wanted to see how they could improve service without spending more money. So they're using the same budget amount. Anyway, what we decided to do this week was invite Belinda Woodiel-Brill to come on and explain this. She goes into detail on what I just mentioned. I'll just scratch the surface of it there. But she is the planning director and the public information officer for CAT, and she does I thought a really great job of kind of walking you through what they've done, what's coming up next, and what they hope to accomplish.
All right, well, let's go to that interview.
This week, our guest is Belinda Woodiel-Brill. She is the Director of Planning and Public Information for Knoxville Area Transit. And there's a lot of stuff going on with CAT. And we want to welcome you, Belinda, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, great. You guys going through a lot of changes. The big one that you guys are kind of rolling out now is the CAT Reimagined, which is the whole bus system. You're basically a new transit system map. So tell us about, first of all, why you're doing it and kind of what the process has been up until now.
Yes, absolutely. So CAT Reimagined has been in the works for a little over a year. And just for some background, it has been probably 12 years since we really took a close look at the whole transit system. So the last time we did that really was when we moved to Knoxville Station. And that was in August of 2010. And it was really a time to sort of say, okay, what's working, what doesn't? And of course, Knoxville has continued to evolve in those 12 years. There are new trip generators, there are new places to go, there are new places people live and work and play. And so we want to be sure that transit keeps up with that evolution to the best of our abilities. And so CAT Reimagined has been a chance to sort of step back and say, what's changed about where we're operating in and what do we need to do to change? But it also has been almost initially sort of a philosophical discussion with the community about what the community of Knoxville wants transit to be. So that was the work that we did last year. We went out to the community and said, okay, we recognize that transit cannot do everything. We can't operate on every single city street every 10 minutes and get you where you need to go in 30 minutes, anyone. So we need to figure out, with the resources that we have, what sort of transit system does Knoxville want CAT to be? And there are sort of two ends of the spectrum. One end is what we call sort of a ridership focused approach to transit. It's very business-like, it's very focused on productivity. So we could have a few routes in our network that operate really frequently. So major corridors, 15-minute service all day long, all weekend long. That's one end of the spectrum. But what that means is we're taking all of our buses and all of our resources and concentrating them in small places. And so the area overall that we cover would be less. So that's one approach to transit. The other one is, I think everybody in Knoxville needs to have really good access to some level of transit service. And so the other end of the spectrum is what we sort of call coverage, which means we try to be as many places within the city as we can and reach as many people as we can, but the service is not going to be very frequent, very convenient. Your trip's going to be a lot longer. So where on that spectrum does the city and the community want us to be? And so we did, and that's kind of a hard concept to explain, but we did a huge amount of outreach trying to explain that concept and let people tell us, where do you think we should be on this spectrum? Should we be focused more on ridership? Should we be focused more on coverage? And after that intense public process, the Knoxville Transportation Authority heard all that input, and they voted to shift us more towards a ridership type of network, not completely, but more toward a ridership type of network. So we, as the planning group, which are consultants and our planning team, went back and said, okay, here's our task. What can we come up with that fits what the board has tasked us with based on what the community said they wanted, which was more of a ridership type of network. Keeping it budget neutral, that's the big challenge. So that means there are going to be some losers in the coverage area, and there's going to be some winners in the ridership area. So some areas will see more frequent service, but that also means there are some areas that have coverage now that would not under this scenario. So we have done the big reveal, and that draft network is now out for the public to look at. So it meets the criteria the board set out for us, but now is the really big public question of, did we get it right? Did the reality of what we're looking at match your expectations of what you thought you would see in a transit network? And so the month of February is really the time that we're really trying to ask the public to look at this draft map, say, no, you totally missed the mark, or yes, you got it right, but can you do this, this, or this? Or absolutely, this is exactly what I was looking for. And so that's where we are in this public process. And so we're calling it sort of phase 2 of public engagement. And that's where we are now.
And what are I know you're having some public meetings, but can people also go online, go to the website and give feedback that way?
Yes. In fact, that's probably, that's one of the easiest ways to do that. So we have a special dedicated website for this project, and it is called catreimagine.com. So if you go to catreimagine.com, one of the first things you'll see is take the survey. And so the survey doesn't leave you flying blind. There's a lot of background information. You get to look at the draft map. You get to compare it to what we call the pre-COVID network, which is how we were operating before COVID, which uses the same level of resources for this draft network. So asks you a series of questions about what you think of this draft network. Is this better for you? Is this better for your friends and family? Is this better for the community as a whole? And then give us some specific comments about what you think of this network. So the survey is available online, plus a ton of background information is available at catreimagine.com. The full draft network report is available. You can kind of find out the background of what's changed and why. Another big thing that's a part of this draft network is the idea of increasing the access for the majority of the people that we serve, or the majority of the residents of Knoxville. So can you get places faster than you could before? And we use sort of a 45-minute window as a reasonable amount of time you might travel on transit. So we have what we call these isochrones, and it's an image of a sort of dot or a person, and where within that area around them can they get in a 45-minute window. And you can see the difference in the old network and the new draft network as to the increases in job access and in just access to people with this new design. So again, one of the benefits is that the people who have that access can get places faster and can get more places within a 45-minute window. But again, what that means is there are some areas that do not have access at all. So it's, again, finding that balance. So all of that detailed information is at catreimagine.com. You can sort of look at how the system changes in specific places. You can look. There's a lot of really good information there, and that's a great place to start. We do have a couple of public meetings. We have actually one virtual one tomorrow. People can still register for that. It's probably too late for your blog. But we also have 2 in-person public meetings that will be the 23rd and the 25th. So those are both at Knoxville Station. So all of that information, again, is all on the website.
One thing that is neat about the website is you can actually compare the maps, the current map or the pre-COVID map, as you call it, and the draft map. And see, and you're right, there were, I noticed several changes. The route, I believe it's 90 that goes around, down Cedar Lane, and that area is going to get less coverage, and I'm assuming that's because of ridership. Sequoia Hills is no longer going to have a route. Of course, I think you all cut that back during COVID, if I'm not mistaken.
We are currently operating reduced service due to our workforce shortage, which has continued through beyond what was the prime time of COVID. So we've continued to struggle with workforce, as I know a lot of other transit systems and businesses in general have struggled. But we are continuing to hire, continuing to train, but we're still not at those levels that we were in what we call the pre-COVID network, is kind of how we define that.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
No, you go ahead, Jesse.
Well, I was just going to follow up on that, talking about COVID. The staffing struggles is one thing, but I know a lot of transit systems in the country also saw big drops in ridership, especially the first year of COVID when a lot of things were closed or people were working from home. What has CAT seen over the last 3 years in your ridership?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So we also have seen a decrease in ridership. But I look back to the early days of COVID, which every day in transit was a new challenge, was a new unknown. There was so much we didn't know. And what to me was one of the strangest times of my career ever was when we were telling people, do not ride the bus. Don't get on the bus unless you have to, because we were trying to distance people. I mean, this was even before masks. So we were limiting every bus to 10 people or less. And we were telling people, do not get out and ride. But at the same time, we were trying to eliminate the interaction between the passenger and the bus operator spending time together. And so we eliminated fares. So we were saying, yeah, fares are free, but don't get on the bus. Don't ride with us. And it was so odd. And it was also just so hard too, because, you know, I would see people waiting on a bus with their Hardee's uniform on, and the driver saying, I'm sorry, I've reached my max, and just people saying, I'm going to lose my job if I can't get to my job, you know. So it was a very strange time. So obviously ridership dropped off, and then ridership continued to drop off, you know, just during COVID, fears of COVID. You know, we did the amount of disinfecting that we did for every bus was epic. And the different stages of cleaning. I mean, we had foggers in every time the bus lineup came through. We had people coming in and wiping down everything on a bus every hour the bus came through. It was crazy. But anyway, despite all our best efforts, obviously, it was not really appealing for a lot of people to ride the bus during COVID. And so I think between that and a lot of work from home, we and a lot of other transit systems are continuing. Ship is going up and has continued to go up over the past several months. I don't know, 6 or 8 months at least. But it's just a gradual progression. And then, you know, the other thing that's difficult is it can't go up to pre-COVID levels when we're operating on reduced service levels. So, you know, we still have our own challenges internally about getting our workforce back up to full strength before we can say, hey, you should hop back on the bus. Oh yeah, we don't really have that peak service anymore, so you have to wait 30, you know. So it's a little bit of a challenge as we continue to come out of COVID.
Yeah, well, what are the next steps in the CAT Reimagine process? I know you talked about the public meetings. What's going to happen after that, and when will the shift be made from the pre-COVID network to the post-COVID? I can't say post-COVID, because COVID's always going to be here. But
right.
the new network.
Yes. So what is going to happen next is this month of February, we're really going to try to get as many people to take a look at the draft network as possible, take the survey, really understand what the implications are for them, for the community, and really weigh in on the draft network. We will take all of those comments back and see what we need to tweak about it, and hopefully make those tweaks and re-present that to the Knoxville Transportation Authority as sort of a formal, asking them to formally adopt this new plan. And so that will, of course, be an extensive sort of public hearing process that will continue to hear from the public before they make that decision. And then I suspect that will probably be over the course of at least a couple of KTA, Knoxville Transportation Authority meetings, probably late spring. And then if it is approved, then we start doing all of the internal background work to essentially create a new transit system. So where do new bus stop signs need to go? What do the signs need to say? What are the new numbering systems? What are the public information schedules look like? So sort of starting to dive into the weeds on all of the details of the schedules and getting our drivers up to speed on new routes and ways things operate. So I think realistically, the soonest this would happen is probably May of next year. January would be pretty optimistic, so I'm going to say probably May of 2024 if everything continues forward and the board decides to adopt this new network.
Hey, great. One other thing. This is beyond Cat Reimagine. You guys are doing a lot of stuff. Continuing to transition the fleet to electric vehicles. There's going to be be working with TVA to come out with a rollout plan and all that. And then what else is going on with electrification and anything else that's going on in Cat?
Yeah, we do. We are starting to move to electric, and that's very exciting. Everybody loves our electric vehicles, and I've been in this biz, as Jesse knows, a long time, and I swear I don't think we've ever done anything that the public has responded to like they've responded to electric buses. They just love the electric buses, and we do too. They're wonderful vehicles, but I always tell anybody that they aren't going to do any good unless you get on them. So we can have electric buses driving around, but if you don't get on them and leave your car at home, then we can't make everything a lot better. So but we are increasing our electric fleet. We are on a pathway to continue to do that. Right now the plan is for us to be electrified. Now, we will see where technology goes. There are transit systems experimenting with fuel cells right now and all kinds of cool stuff. So, the technology may shift during the course of our electrification process, and we just would have to shift with it. But for now, we are moving towards electrics, and we love them. They're really cool vehicles. So encourage everybody to check those out. So we are moving toward electric, which is great. We are also working on, at long last, creating mobile ticketing so that we can start to provide some opportunities for paying your fare that don't involve having a dollar with you, because none of us have dollars with us very much anymore. So we have recently launched a new real-time app, and it's called Transit. It's just called Transit. You can download it from your Android or iPhone store, and it's free. And it allows you to track your bus. You can look at where the closest buses are around you, where you want to go, plan your trip, follow where your bus is in real time. So that's a really great technology. And what's great about the Transit app is that it is used by transit systems across the world. So you can use your Transit app in Knoxville, and then if you go to Asheville, you can pull up your Transit app and it will tell you where the Asheville buses are that are closest to you, or Madrid, Spain. So it's a really interesting and fun tool, but we are going to be adding mobile ticketing onto that app. So what's great about that is you will be able to plan your trip, track your bus, and pay your fare all in one app. So we are making progress toward that, and hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be able to launch that mobile ticketing. And we think that's going to be hopefully a nice game changer for us, for people who might be interested in riding the bus and now have the convenience of knowing when the next one's coming by and knowing they can pay their fare using their app.
All right. Well, that's probably a good place to leave it. Lots of things coming up, basically. So I'm sure we will be checking back in with you as all of that rolls out. But for now, I guess the point is that people ought to, if they have not yet, they should go to catreimagined.com, take a look, and provide any feedback. So,
yes.
Belinda, thanks a lot for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. It was great chatting with you, and I appreciate your help in explaining Cat Reimagined to the public.
All right, and thanks again to Belinda for joining us. And of course, we will be continuing to cover the evolution of Cat's reimagining. And as she said, if you want to give feedback on that and have not yet, you can go to catreimagined.com and do just that. Okay, we are to the Q&A portion of the podcast. Every week we invite readers on our subscriber-only Facebook page, The Compass Colloquy, to ask us about anything they'd like to hear discussed on the podcast. And we had a question this week about something that you wrote about, Scott, which is a planned Bitcoin mining operation in East Knox County. Specifically, readers were wondering about the impact of it on the local community there, whether they'll produce a lot of noise or other disruptions to that rural area, and also what its impact on our local electrical grid will be. So what's going on with the Bitcoin mine?
Well, it was an interesting thing. The Planning Commission met last week. Typical agenda. This company wanted to rezone property out near, not in, but near Midway Business Park in Strawberry Plains, and so, but they wanted the same zoning as the business park has, which is basically a big industrial park kind of zoning, and I'd never heard of the company before, and they didn't say when you get property rezoned, you don't have to give them a reason. There are a range of uses that are allowed in each zone, and you don't have to give them a reason. They're not supposed to really consider them. They're supposed to consider the whole range, not just one particular.
Right. Does
thing.
that zone work for that property?
It doesn't. Yeah. If a dog kennel is allowed in a zone, and you're a planning commissioner and you hate dogs, first of all, I don't know how you got named planning commissioner, but if you hate dogs, you can't vote against it just because you hate dogs. It's not you're not supposed to anyway. Anyway, so I called their representative here. It turned out that yes, they wanted to build a cryptocurrency mining operation out there, and
does that mean they're going to be digging for cryptocurrency?
They are not
cryptocurrency buried in East Knox County.
They're not going to take literal shovels. They are taking virtual shovels out. I barely have a grasp of cryptocurrency, but one of the things is it uses what is called blockchain technology. You have to you go through all of these complex mathematical calculations to come up with something, and basically
right. You're kind of like, it's kind of solving math problems,
Yeah.
and if you solve enough problems, you kind of make cryptocurrency.
right, and this is currency that's unregulated by governments and banks and anything. It's just and it's a weird, at least. I'm an old guy. It's weird to me. Yeah. But anyway, one of the things about this is because it relies on these mathematic calculations, they use computers. Mm-hmm. They use lots of computers, lots of servers in big facilities that get very, very, very hot. And they use lots and lots and lots of electricity. And then they get very, very hot and have to be cooled. And most use big air conditioning systems that are loud.
Right, and this has been an issue in some parts of the country.
And this is one of the things is companies that do this tend to pick rural counties, rural areas that don't have zoning, so they can just go in and build something, and out in the country, and thinking nobody's going to care. But these, I've never been to one. I'm told that these air-cooled facilities sound like a jet airplane engine, 24/7. It runs all the time, and there have been a lot of battles over them in a lot of places. Well, this company's coming in to build one here. They said that they use a different technology to cool their servers, so they're still going to use lots and lots of electricity, but the cooling is done with a liquid coolant, like an antifreeze essentially, and it's very similar to a radiator. So going to be a liquid water cooled system. So there's not going to be that noise that's associated with these facilities. The thing that was odd about this is it did not, because they weren't required to disclose what they did. It wasn't in the Planning Commission documentation, which is fine. It's not supposed to be, but the Planning Commissioners didn't ask about it. There's no discussion about it. Even though Midway Business Park, which is next to this property, was so controversial, no one from East Knox County who had opposed Midway Business Park just a couple of years ago, no one was apparently aware that this was coming up on the agenda, and no one showed up to argue against it. The only person who spoke out against it was Kevin Murphy, who's been on our show. He's with the Knox County Planning Alliance, and he objected to the Planning Commission staff ignoring an East Knox community plan, a small area plan that is used to help guide development, and that they ignored it completely, and they shouldn't have ignored it. He wasn't aware that it was a cryptocurrency mining facility. So the bottom line, to answer the reader's question, the noise, according to the company, is not going to be much of a factor.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, because of the cooling system they use. The electric grid, one of the things is, for now, no problem, because when Midway Business Park was developed, TVA and KUB built substations there. So high voltage lines come in from TVA to TVA's facility. There's a substation there to serve the business park, and it's all brand spanking new, and there are no tenants in the business park.
There's plenty of electricity out there right now.
There's a lot of electricity twiddling its thumbs out there.
Right.
And so there's plenty of electricity to go to this place. The other thing is you talk about, I'm not sure what the economic impact of this is going to be, because they don't sell anything.
They don't have any employees.
They really don't. It's not a job thing. I mean, basically they need 3 or 4 employees,
right,
to basically show up and make sure there's no fires, place it in on fire. But really, it's a single digits employees, and they don't have customers, so they won't have traffic.
Right.
So I mean, it's real hard to gauge, what this impact is going to be. So, but it's not a done deal. They have Planning Commission approved the rezoning last Thursday. County Commission is going to consider it in March at their meeting. And if it passes there, they have to come back with a development plan for the site to Planning Commission, and they can reject that. So there's still other stops along the way, and but we'll see how that goes. It'll be I haven't run across any other facilities that use that cooling system, although they have others that use it. But I have seen a video of that cooling system, and it sounds like water rushing around, and that's about it. And that's inside, not outside. I mean, so there really is no, if that's representative, there is no comparison noise-wise. But that doesn't mean that everybody, especially residents in East Knox County, are going to be welcoming about it. I don't know. Now that the word is getting out,
right,
they're finding out. They weren't at Planning Commission, which I cover. There probably will be some people at the County Commission meeting, which you cover. So
we'll see. I was mostly interested in it just because I feel like, there's crypto has gone through booms and busts in the decade plus that it's been sort of a big talking point. And we're sort of in a bust period right now. We've had some major crypto companies declare bankruptcy. Of course, there's the big scandal with FTX and a big crypto exchange. So it's just interesting to me to see somebody. I didn't know whether people were still going out there, building coin mining operations, but I guess there are.
Apparently there are, and you don't know because of the volatility of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and first of all, I mean, really in the grand scheme of things, it's really new, as a medium of exchange, and you wonder how they're getting. Who's loaning the money?
Right.
Or they're loaning them the Bitcoin to build these things, but they're getting the financing somewhere, and so they are building these things, and it is kind of weird because the really Bitcoin, the people who are real gung ho about it say, this is the future, and the people who are gung ho about it think it's a fad and it'll go away.
Right.
And if it's a fad and it goes away, there's going to be a piece of property in Strawberry Plains full of computer servers that are going to be going unused.
Right. Well, we'll see what happens there.
Yep.
All right, looking ahead to next week, County Commission meets on Monday for their monthly work session. One thing that is not, it's on the agenda, but it's going to be deferred. We talked last month about County Commissioner Dacia Lundy planning to bring a resolution seeking subpoenas of Sheriff Tom Spangler and Sheriff's Office employees having to do with the McAllister's Deli incident back in November, which we've talked about a lot. She is planning to bring those subpoenas, but she's not bringing them this month, even though there is a resolution on the agenda, because she's not going to be here at the work session this week, and she wants to be in town, obviously, whenever that gets discussed. So she is actually asking to postpone that to March. On the agenda, there is, as we talked about, the mental health court agreement with the state to get some funding to get that started. There's several infrastructure projects, sort of, little projects all over the county that they're doing to improve infrastructure here and there. And that is kind of, we'll see what else maybe bubbles out of it. Also Monday, Seth Barber, our producer, who is either keeping us informed by scrolling social media while he's recording us, or ignoring us and not paying any attention to us and messing around on social media while he's recording us, whichever one of those it is, it's okay. He has alerted us that he just found a notification this afternoon that there's going to be a protest rally Monday at 5 o'clock in Crouch Park having to do with the drag bill. This is being organized by Knox Pride. So they are trying to get people mobilized, trying to get people out and visible and engaged on this. Of course, as we said, that bill has already passed the state Senate. And so, who knows what the prospects are for anybody trying to stop it at this point. But they are hoping, I think, to bring a lot of people down there.
Monday's a busy day.
Yeah.
Because you got the county commission work session. You've got the protest down there. The city's holding a meeting at Corbella Temple on their projects that are going on in South Knoxville, the South Knox waterfront, and they will be discussing the pedestrian bridge that we've been talking about.
What time is that meeting?
That you would ask me that.
I put you on the spot.
You put me on the spot because I haven't gone back. I believe it's 4:30. But if you are a subscriber, and which would be, if you're not a subscriber, you go to compassknox.com and sign up. You're a subscriber, you'll find out on Monday morning, because we always run down the public meetings on Mondays.
Right.
You'll be able to find out exactly what time it is. I believe it's 4:30.
Yeah. Late afternoon.
And then there's yet another meeting on a Superfund cleanup site at Smoky Mountain Smelters, which is formerly known as Smoky Mountain Smelters. It's in South Knoxville as well, further down toward the Blount County line. But it's a super fun site. They have a lot of problems there. The EPA's done. There's been some cleanup to the site, but they're going to be talking about cleaning up completely cleaning up the site and finishing it up. And there's going to be a meeting then. And before you ask, I believe it's 6 o'clock.
Okay.
But don't hold me to that. And there may be other meetings as well on that particular issue. And speaking of meetings, might as well keep going. Next Thursday and Friday, the University of Tennessee Board of Trustees are meeting. They're meeting in Chattanooga. You can attend it virtually. You don't have to drive down to Chattanooga to see it. But one of the things they'll be talking about is the Knoxville campus master plan, which we've talked about before as well. So that's if you don't recall, that's where they're going to redefine the campus growth boundaries as being a 1.5 mile radius around campus, where they
everything they can
see, yes, is their domain. But and there will be many other things. The agenda hadn't been out the last time I checked, so I don't know everything that's going to be on there. But this is the system-wide board of trustees. So they'll be talking about not just the Knoxville campus, but the other campuses as well.
So you're going to be using the Compass travel budget to go down to Chattanooga for the meetings?
I don't know if I'm going to use the travel budget or I'm going to use the Wi-Fi budget. I don't know. One of the two.
Yeah.
But I was born in Chattanooga. Still have a couple of family members down there. Love the town. It's a great city. So I might go down there. Problem is, if I go down there, I might be tempted not to go to the meeting. That's
right. Yeah. There's a lot of fun things to do in Chattanooga that are not Board of Trustees meetings.
That's true.
All right. Well, we will have coverage of all of that next week, and I guess depending on where you are for the meeting, that might affect where you are for our podcast.
That would, yes.
But we will be here to talk to you about all of that. Our producer is Seth Barber of Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright. And there's a new Yola Tango album out today that's really good, so you should check it out. We'll talk to you next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.